All right. So we're doing a short talk introduction. I hope to do as a series of videos about some of the thoughts that I had as a young individual looking at different ways to grow their income streams. Okay. And so just for some background, my name is Arnold Lau. I've been working in both the commercial enterprise space, corporate world, as you might say, as well as doing various types of entrepreneurial types of activities. So I have a pretty broad background, and I'm just here to share some of my experiences in those various areas. But this first chat is really just a broad introduction and talking about some of the things that most people might be thinking about as they start off in their careers, or maybe they might be later on in their careers and they're thinking about how can they grow their income streams. Okay. And I also have a host, a moderator, Ilya Alper, and he will be helping to facilitate questions and talk through in more detail some of the topics that we're going to raise here in this introductory chat. Okay. So what do we want to talk about here? We want to talk about growing income streams. Okay. And so usually the way I look at it, whether you're first starting off or looking at how you can quote unquote make more money, um, there's a couple of different thought process that will pop up. Okay. So let's go through some of that. Okay. Right. So again, make more money. That's what we're trying to do here. Okay. Now, not as much in my day when I first started off, but right now, a very common term that you hear is a side hustle. Okay, a lot of people think about a side hustle, and what I've put up here on the screen is just a formal definition of what is a side hustle or what everybody usually thinks about as a side hustle. Okay, and so basically, you have your full-time job, mostly, right? Sometimes people are stringing together multiple jobs, part-time jobs. Um, but most people think of side hustle as like I have a day job and then I do something else on the side. Could be another job. You could be doing some freelancing, um, or you could be doing something that is entrepreneurial in nature, okay, where you're growing a business, trying something out, and see how it works, okay? But the goal there is to try to get another source of income usually, but it could be for other things. So let's take a look at that. And so what happens here? Like I said, one primary driver is looking to earn some extra money. Okay. The other things that people might be thinking about is they have a certain passion. They're interested in doing something in particular. If it happens to make money, great. But most of the time, um, it takes some time to make some money, right? So I think there has to be a certain aspect of it that you care or you're passionate about that particular thing that you're doing as a side hustle, right? Making extra money alone can't be the sole driver for doing that because if you don't really like it in very short order, you kind of like drop it pretty quickly, or you're not willing to invest what it takes to be successful with that. Okay, so um, as you probably may know at this point, if you've looked at all into this topic, so common side hustles include like typical freelancing. There's a number of platforms that support freelancing. Um, selling products or services online, maybe driving for like Uber or something like that. Um, renting out property, blogging, and doing gig work. Okay. Um, so, you know, you probably watch it on YouTube or whatever, you'll see different people touting, doing this type of activity. Okay. So just to give you a little bit of food for thought, okay? You say, wow, what's so good about this, or why should I get involved with it? So the typical thing, especially if you watch a lot of YouTube personalities, is like saying, okay, it's fairly low cost of entry to get in, and then you can magically make a whole bunch of money from it. Okay. And in some cases, maybe it works out great. All of a sudden, you put out a video, it goes viral, and then you build off of that. And then you just got money flowing in, right? But just to kind of give some context here, okay? And you don't have to go with 50,000, but you put out 50,000, that's something that, has been sourced and it's out there, right? So let's say you want to try to earn 50,000 a year on Etsy selling a product. For, let's say, a price of $32, which is probably a reasonable price, you would need to sell 1,600 units of that thing, right? And that's just gross income, okay? And it's not that easy to do that out of thin air, right? It takes some time to build up the ability to sell that many units of a product. And often there's other costs associated with, namely marketing, to be able to get to that level of units. Okay. So if you look at it, there's a source that will tell you that 74% of Etsy sellers fail to make enough full-time money. Okay, assuming the full-time money is somewhere around 50,000 a year. Okay, and they end up quitting. Okay, and you can see similar numbers across any of the other types of platforms, whether you're looking at doing online teaching or whatnot, right? There's a lot of people, you'll see they have a whole bunch of accounts that are open, but how many of those accounts are really active and selling enough to make quote unquote a decent amount of money? Okay, it's roughly around those type of lines where you probably figure there's really a small percentage, maybe about 10% or even less, that's making significant amounts of money on any of these types of platforms. Okay. All right. So, so I mentioned that side hustle as one of those things that most people are thinking, or various personalities are touting as a way for you to augment your income, right? Fast, easy, and you'll be rich in no time at all with this side income, right? And I'm not saying that's not possible. It is possible, but just to be realistic, it's only for a small percentage of people that's willing to put in the time, money, and effort into it. Okay. People that tout it as a passive income um, will probably make their passive income by selling videos to you, right? To look at and do it. They're probably not doing it from their primary job that they're trying to tout as passive income. Okay. Um, so so why would you be looking to do this side hustle? Well, probably because you're not maximizing your income from your primary job, right? So, I would say before you go looking around different options, do consider if you have a primary job. Not everybody has a primary job, but if you have a primary job, well, take a look at what it takes to maximize your income from your primary job, right? First and foremost, right? If you're looking at this from an income perspective, right? And then the other thing I would say in terms of maximizing your income from your primary job, don't think about it as just the salary that you're drawing, okay? Assuming that you're working for a company that offers benefits and whatnot, uh, and it depends on the company, it varies, right? But there's different types of opportunities to build your income, right? Or your assets through your job besides your salary. Okay. So for example, if you happen to work for a company that offers you a 401k, right, and they happen to offer you matching, um, that's extra income there, but that's provided that you set aside money to go into your 401k. Okay. Um, and, you know, the typical, I mean, there's people that do what they call the Roth 401k also, but the typical thing is the regular 401k, which you're putting in pre-tax money. Okay, that means you're taking away taxable income up front for now, that won't get taxed in the current year by the government. Okay, so that's one benefit that you get like upfront. And once that money goes in, it will continue to grow in that 401k account, tax-free or tax deferred. Uh, and you also get a lot of times, not all the time, but sometimes oftentimes your company will offer you matching funds, right? So if you don't contribute into your 401k, and your company is offering you matching funds, that's basically turning down money from your company. Okay. Um, and the thing is, like, once you set aside the money you put into 401k, it's not like it just sits there, right? Um, I look at things in like investments into, let's say, the stock market as um, opportunities to grow your asset. There's two ways they can grow. One is through dividends, right? So there's what you call dividend reinvestment. So you put that money in there, the dividends come out, you reinvest it, and your your assets continue to grow, right, while it's in the 401k. And then you also just have straight growth of that asset. Okay. So that's just one example, right? There's other programs, what they call health savings accounts. Uh, and there's a couple other programs that a lot of companies may or may not offer, depending on your level and situation, right? There could be things where you can buy your company's stock at a discounted price. Um, any number of things, right? So it varies from company to company. Bottom line, what I'm saying is that your company can provide you more than just your salary uh, as a way to generate income or assets. Okay. Uh, and the thing about assets, hopefully we're talking about assets that have an ability to generate more income, right? So it compounds, right? It continues to grow. So I know at the beginning, it looks like a giant mountain that you're trying to climb. But these things over time, if you're patient, right, they will continue to compound and grow. And you get, bigger and bigger notional values for the same percentage growth, right? So if I tell you that I have $100 and I'm getting 10% return. Ah, great. I get $10, right? But if I tell you I have $1 million, right, over however many years of growth, I have $1 million that's generating 10%. Well, then that's a little bit more significant, right? And you might say, oh, it seems like a long way to get to $1 million from growing your assets in the market, right? But if you know the rule of 72, if I go with something that is basically somewhere from the 8 to 10% growth annualized, it doesn't take that long to double your money, right? And then over a series of doubling your money, which we know that's exponential growth, okay? Um, you take a look at that, uh, you'd be surprised. You have to be patient, right? And the thing about 401k, it's almost like a forced savings, right? Unless you go there and forcibly withdraw with penalties, you're pretty much stuck with that money in there, okay? So anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on that. There's a number of different things to consider with that, as well as just, basically negotiating with your company to bump up your primary salary, okay? So what I'm saying here is that when you look at the different options to make more money, you got to start with the first case is the place that you work at, right? Have you maximized how much income you're drawing from your primary job, okay? Then once you move from there, then there's a couple other common things to look at, okay? So one of them is around just the markets. And I kind of broadly generalize that markets because there's different types of like asset classes that you can be talking about. There's different types of exchanges and whatnot. But the typical one that people might think about is something like the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ, right? And I think that's probably good enough just to introduce that topic, right? Um, and, there's different degrees of risk that, you may have tolerance for, which would define what type of products you want to invest in. But a very common one that a decent chunk of Americans are investing in when they are in the market is basically just buying an ETF or an index. Okay. And there's pros and cons to that. But if you're thinking about in terms of passive income, um, it doesn't get much more passive than that, right? So you're gonna just put something in there. Every once in a while, you have to check on it, make sure it's not like, out of whack for some reason. But you pretty much buy it in there. And so me personally, I actually have spent a good chunk of time with my assets sitting either in the S&P 500 or in mid cap index. Okay. And over time, um, it really has, I've been in the market for like, I guess 40 some odd years. It really has generated like 10% annualized uh, income, which is what many experts tell you is, the long-term average historically. Who knows what happens in the future? Um, and to be fair, there have been some times where I've taken the money out of those things to make some side bets, and I happen to get lucky on some of those things. But if I didn't do that and I just stayed strictly within S&P 500 and maybe mixed with a mid cap index, that's the type of return that you would get for very little stress and very little time. Okay, so markets is a pretty good option there, in my opinion. It's done well for me over time, right? But it's not usually a get rich quick type of situation. Okay. There are times you might pick whatever the hot stock is and make a big bet on it. You might leverage and do whatever, but it's a high risk strategy. Okay. And the problem for a young investor is they don't have that much money to put in, even when it's leverage. And the problem is if the bet goes against you, you're kind of wiped out. You have nothing. So, I would not advocate you going into a high risk strategy in the markets when you're young. You know, you don't have that much assets to play around in the first place, right? If you happen to have a decent amount of assets set aside and you can set aside a percentage of it to make those big bets, that's a different story. Okay. I won't go too much more into that, but I would just say markets is a pretty good option. And then the other bit is real estate. Everyone knows real estate. You see a ton of videos talking about real estate. Okay. And I just kind of generalize it to say, well, you buy something, probably you do some sort of renovation, maybe not. And then either you rent it or you sell it, right? And that kind of covers a lot of different types of subcategories of real estate, right? Whether you're talking about wholesaling, you're talking about like flipping, you're talking about whatever, right? But the general idea is you're doing something, you're buying the asset. It could be a distressed asset, it could be like a turnkey, whatever. And then you do something or you wait and then you turn around and sell it. Or you might potentially hold on to it, rent it out, and use it to, uh, you know, leverage up, get financing, do whatever. Okay. Now, the other option that you might look at is essentially um, paper, right? Paper means that you have an underlying physical asset, but essentially you're working above that and working through the paper products, okay? And that's what they call REITs, real estate investment trusts, okay? I won't really go into detail about what that is, just to say that's an option in terms of renting, in terms of investing in the real estate. And then a more recent phenomenon with real estate is what they call crowdfunding. So there's various types of crowdfunding where you, along with a whole bunch of other people, or a decent number of other people, will get involved with something involved with real estate. It could be like getting into like a large multifamily unit. It could be like some sort of project to build it out, to rent it for 5 years, and then you get your money back or whatever, right? So you have that. Again, I'm not going to go into details because I'm trying to make this more of an introductory discussion rather than going into the details of each of these things. Okay. Now, the last thing, which is a very broad category that I'll just say product sales, right? Product sales could cover a lot of stuff, right? One, I could be acquiring a product or developing a product, right, from wherever, right? And when I say product, it could be yourself. You could be the product, right? You could be something that you have something, your knowledge or your experience or whatever, you're bringing that to the table, and then you're packaging that up into, let's say, a course, right? And then you're selling that. So you yourself could be a product, right? Or you could be buying a product, acquiring a product in some way, developing it, right? And then oftentimes, right? There's always exceptions, but oftentimes the products don't really sell themselves. You need to do some sort of marketing, right? So you have to do the marketing side of it. And then you might say, okay, so I do the marketing, right? But the marketing isn't the end all be all. That's not where you stop, right? Marketing only gets them to your doorstep. You still have to close. You still need to sell. You still need to be able to sell it, right? And that could be you personally positioning yourself to be able to get the customer to buy that product once they show up at your doorstep. It could be, let's say you're doing e-commerce, like making that whole user experience to get the customer to be enthusiastic to buy your product. Okay. And then, of course, you know, alongside the e-commerce, the other option, of course, is doing something in terms of selling something from a bricks and mortar type of setup. Okay. And there's a couple of different options on the bricks and mortar, which again, I can go into in another discussion. Okay. All right. So with that, I hope that's a pretty good introduction into some of the different options that we can look at when we talk about growing income streams. Okay. So I'd like to hand it off to Ilya, who's helping to facilitate today. And maybe, Ilya, maybe you can share some of your thoughts about what we just discussed and maybe throw out some questions.
Uh, Thanks, Arnold. That was a good overview. Uh, Definitely, there's a diverse variety of ways one can improve or supplement their income. Um, I had some questions come up while you were going through your talk, specifically kind of around some of the stats you mentioned. So 74% of Etsy sellers fail. I'm curious if, what are some of the contributing factors to their failure?
So, and I can't tell you like I have data to back up like the different types of reasons. I can only uh hypothesize or speculate. And I happen to be doing different things. I've done stuff on Etsy and eBay, Amazon and whatnot, a couple of different platforms. Um, and so, I think a lot of these situations, like to get set up, is fairly low cost, right? So you might say, okay, I'm going to just dabble with it. So number one, um, you have a lot of people who might be going into it saying, okay, this is like, this is quote unquote cheap. Let me go try it out. Let me just get in there and see what I can do. Okay. Um, so there's like pros and cons to that, right? If you have something that is a little bit more capital intensive, that takes more of your money to get on board with it, you might say, okay, that's a barrier to entry. But at the same time, you might say that also means number one, there's less competition, right? When you have higher barriers to entry. Number two, it also means that, okay, if I were to put out however much money, 50,000, 100,000 or whatever, to get into a business, I'm going to be, it's a, right, it's a big amount of money for most people, right? Um, I'm going to be pretty committed to it, right? I'm going to be seriously committed to it because I just put out a good chunk of change there. Um, and and with every business, there's going to be some sort of gotchas that pop up, challenges that pop up. Um, I'm not going to really give up at those initial challenges that might pop up. I said, okay, I got to figure out a way to get around this, right? And sort this out and deal with it. But if you didn't put up that much money into it, I would say that you're not really that committed to it, right? You haven't really sunk that much money into it. So you don't feel like too bad if something comes up as like a challenge and you say, oh, you know, this is too hard. I'm going to forget about it and just move on and do something else, right? So because it's cheap to get in, relatively cheap to get involved, I would argue that number one, you have a lot of competition, right? Because it's also cheap for everybody else to get involved. And then number two, um, you know, you're not necessarily strongly committed to it because you haven't really invested that much of your time or your money into it. So that's my feeling on why a lot of people, they might give it a shot, they'll try it out, and they'll end up sitting there with dormant accounts and they won't do anything. So that's the other thing. When you look at these e-commerce stuff, it's not like you set up your products on day one and then you just stay with that set of products and then leave it at that. There's actually a constant activity in terms of like refining the products that you are listing, adding new products, removing some products. There's a constant type of adjusting to the market, right? There's very few times where you have one particular product that you're just going to be selling it like from day one through infinity, right? However many, you know, could be a year, 2 years, or whatever. You're constantly getting new models of something. You're constantly looking at different types of products to list, whatever. So that all that takes effort, right? So just like when you look at people posting blogs or doing whatever on YouTube and stuff like that, there's very few times where you're just going to be sitting there and you have like one thing that goes viral and then you just live off of that, right? You constantly have to be putting out new content. Um, and then I think in the same way for when you're selling products, you constantly have to be putting out new products. And some people may not anticipate that at the beginning. They kind of think of it as like, okay, cool, I got a cheap way to get into this. I have this cool thing that I'm going to sell, and then I set it up, and then I'm done. I'm just going to watch the money roll in. Okay. So that's my feeling as to why a decent chunk of people try it out and they figure out this is not going to be what they want to do.
So they should have more realistic expectations. So maybe instead of the 50,000 figure, they should look for like a 10,000 figure to start with.
Well, I
Uh,
mean, with a number of these things, it's again, I think the one thing to kind of dispel, which I think most people might have like this assumption, is that it's passive income, right?
mhm.
It really isn't, right? And to me, for the people who are doing very well, and again, there's always exceptions, but for the people that are doing well, it's because they put in a significant investment. It could be money, right, to get equipment, marketing, whatever, right? Um, or it could be their own efforts to create new content, right? Or look for new products to put up, position those products appropriately, you know, study trends, look for like what's the hot thing to put up there without that much competition, and all that kind of stuff. Um, you know, keep in mind, like if it were that easy, where you don't have to do much, you don't have to put much money, you don't have to put much time or effort into it, well, what stops like a million other people from doing the same exact thing, right? So if you look at it from a logical standpoint, it just doesn't make sense. It wouldn't make sense, right? So the people who are really making money, they have to be doing something to differentiate themselves from everybody else who's jumping into the same space.
So yeah, when I watch those videos where people teach other people how to set things up, how to run um, e-commerce business, etc. Yeah, it always kind of passes my mind the thought that, if it's so great and successful, why are they telling everybody how to do it,
Right,
right? Why, like, are they not doing it themselves? And why would they want more competition, for example? Or
right.
yeah,
And then
usually
maybe,
if you
yeah,
have something good going on, you probably just quietly continue doing what you're doing.
yeah. You know, and they may be doing it, but they may not be doing it at a very large scale, right? They may be doing it at whatever scale, uh, because they don't want to spend that much time on it or put in that type of effort when it's easier for them just to sell you know, to get rich quick to other people and make money off of that.
Yeah, I mean it's clickbait, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
So, so
so
bottom
they're
line,
getting paid from advertising.
yeah. And so bottom line, like a lot of these things that we talk about here, you can make money. I'm not disputing that, right? The question is like, can you really make it for low effort, low money, low everything? Like, no. Uh, with a few exceptions, that's usually not going to happen, right? You do need to put in something, and are you prepared to do that when you have a full-time job during the day? Um, so I think that's something that a lot of people have that misconception. So that's why you end up with these dormant accounts, like in all these different platforms, or accounts that you only sell like super low amounts of volume, right? Like, just enough maybe to cover like your cost of opening up the shop maybe, if that. So I think those type of things is a very common misconception for a lot of people that get involved here. So that's why you end up in that situation.
So your value for your time that is not sufficient, right? When you're getting involved into those things. Yeah.
Oftentimes it's not, right? And that's why I say like if you have like a primary job, right? A main job that you have, and especially if you're working for like a fairly large company, like if you're looking to say, how can I make more money? Like, first thing is first, start with your primary job and say, am I maximizing how much money am I making with my primary job, right? Before I go off and look at these other options, right? So make sure you go through that and understand like, are you optimized on that front? If you've optimized it, great. Then you can say, okay, given that, how much time am I spending with that primary job? Uh, and how much uh, free cash out of my budget can I allocate to, quote unquote, a side hustle? Okay. So that's the way I would approach it.
Does delegating some of the side hustle activities, does that help grow the side hustle? And is that sustainable in your view?
So I think that is something that is doable, right? But if you if you look at it, oftentimes like the people that we're talking to, the audience that we're talking to, like I said, they might be early in their journey for trying to grow their income, right? So they might not have like the luxury of doing certain things. One of them is basically delegating and hiring. Okay. Um, so I remember like even my first house, I purchased my primary house like about a year after I started working. And the truth is I stretched myself very thin, right? To do that. So at the beginning, like I rented out one of the rooms in my house. Um, and everything I did myself, right? I mowed the grass myself. I, did lots of maintenance. I finished off the basement in my house by myself. I did almost everything on my own, right? I mean, what the hell? I even like I repaired my car on my own. Like a lot of stuff, like I could have, bought it out to mechanic. I could have hired a lawn person. I could have done a whole bunch of things, but all that would be money going out the door. Um, and so you make that trade-off in terms of your time for money at that point. And the truth is, at that point, maybe you're not making that much money, so that's okay, right? But as you get older, hopefully you advanced in your career where your time is worth more money, right? And then you can say, okay, now my time is worth this much more money, and then it's more worth it for me to hire people or delegate to people who will handle these other activities for me. Okay. So depends on where you are in your journey, right? If you're very early in your journey, you may not have the luxury of being able to delegate and hire people to do things, right? Now, having said that, beyond like the initial experimentation, right? So kind of where I'm at right now, I can afford to experiment. I can play around, I can hire a freelancer and let them go at it. If it doesn't work, I'm not really too bothered by it. If it happens to work out, maybe then I'll think about whether I should invest more of my time and effort into it. Not everybody has that luxury. Okay. Um, but the other thing when you think about it is uh, your ability to delegate and get the right people. number one, increases your network, right, to be able to source new opportunities. Number two, it allows you to scale, right? You do everything by yourself, you can only scale so much, right? Whether it's like time that you spend to like get new products out there, you know, marketing, pitching, selling, infrastructure, like all that type of stuff. All those things take time. And if you are doing that all by yourself, you can only take the business so far, right?
Hmm.
So like I said, those are the two aspects. Number one, you know, if you're starting off early, you're making that trade-off between your time and money, right? And you know, you'll probably do that at the beginning, but eventually at some point, right, assuming the business becomes successful because of your efforts, you do need to start to delegate and scale up, right? So
Hmm.
that will come into the picture. If you grow a business from small, where you did everything yourself, you grow it bigger, you need to delegate to be able to scale up effectively. Or number two, you happen to be successful at doing whatever in another business, and you're kind of trying out different things to experiment, then you could also afford to delegate, right? So those are the two times where you can afford to do delegation. But for a lot of people that's early in their journey, they may not be able to delegate because they have to make that trade-off between time and money at the beginning.
Right. And in the beginning, time is on their side, so they can make that commitment.
Right,
Right. And we talk about kind of building the machine, right? The money machine, right? So
right,
yeah, the individual can in the beginning start to do something on their own, even if it's not bringing in a lot of income,
right,
right? It might start, it might cover for itself, and then it might start bringing in a little bit, like sufficient amount. Then you can then take and hire freelancer to carry on, kind of
right,
running the business
right,
and growing it. Or and maybe you start, after some time, you hire another freelancer and another one, and then you have a whole team of freelancers um, doing these things for you, and cumulatively, yeah. So each one of the streams might not be bringing in a significant amount, but it all might add up to a more meaningful number.
right,
But then it does mean you'll have to like build and grow the team, and have people you can rely on to also run the team, right? Because maybe you wouldn't necessarily want to manage 5 or 7 freelancers
right,
if when you get to that stage. And alternatively, you can take that income and put it in another kind of engine, like
yes,
whether you like a stock market, like you mentioned, or a real estate or somewhere else, right? So
yeah.
not necessarily counting on this um, side hustle as a replacement to your primary source, but it could be kind of fueling some of your other streams, and it doesn't have to be massive amount to do that.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, sometimes depending on whether you're playing a long game or not, right? If you're going for the quick buck, there are certain ways to do it. You have to take a lot of risk, usually leveraged risk to be able to do it. But the other thing that you look at, you say, okay, you get something. What am I trying to do with this particular investment? Or in some cases, your investment is, you know, hiring someone that you're delegating stuff to, right? What is it that you're trying to do, right? Are you trying to get immediate cash flow, or are you trying to set yourself up for appreciation and longer term growth, right? And so in some cases, you might say, you know what? I know I'm not going to get that much cash flow right now, but I'm doing something that is going to have long-term growth implications. Either one, helping the asset to grow, like just like you have in the stock market, you have growth stocks and you have cash cows that are generating dividends, right? Oftentimes, you know, you can't have both, right? Oftentimes you don't have something that's kicking out a whole bunch of dividends and it's also high growth, right? And low risk, right? Having all of those together is a very rare situation, right? So oftentimes you're making that trade-off. Same thing when you look at your business, right? So in some cases, you know, maybe you make a trade-off, let's say from real estate. You happen to get a house in a very nice neighborhood, has a good upside potential, but because of the ratio of your rent to your purchase price of the property, or you have like higher property tax, whatever, your initial cash flow may not be that great, right? But you're gonna hopefully pay off at the end on the back end when you get a bigger appreciation of that property, right? Because it's a prime property, you know, class A, blah, blah, all that kind of stuff. And you'll get that. Now, same thing when it comes to hiring people, delegating to people, right? You could look at the person as, oh yeah, they're doing a particular task for me, right? They're my agent. They're in this market. They're my property manager. They're whatever, right? But the other aspect that I look at is these people, they're in tune with the market, right? They're giving me market intelligence. They're giving me potentially network connections and whatever, right? So for example, when I do stuff with real estate, you know, I have people like property manager, agents, or whatever. But let's say I'm missing a lawyer. I need lawyer for something, right? Well, instead of me having to figure out who's the best lawyer, you know, my property manager says, yeah, I've been using this lawyer to cover all my other legal matters with respect to properties or whatever, right? I'm trying to turn something into a condo, right? You know, who has experience doing that? My property manager has a lawyer that's done that before. So, you know, I look at it beyond saying, okay, this person is doing a particular task for me. This person is also an extension of my network. It gives me market intelligence, gives me referrals, either for like new investment opportunities or new people that can help me to optimize my business or deal with certain challenges that my business has to deal with in a particular market.
Okay, I'm conscious of time.
Okay.
Do you want to carry on, or we can take a break here?
Yeah, no, we can we can wrap it up. Like I said, this is more an introduction. And then we'll take some time to drill into each of the particular areas, whether it's like how do we look at particular options to maximize your income with your primary job, and then also look at things in terms of like side hustles, in terms of real estate, in terms of the stock market. Okay.
All
Um,
right.
so that will be coming up in future videos. So I hope everyone enjoyed the discussion for today. And feel free to contact us, send in your comments or questions or ideas for different topics that you would like me to discuss. And then I will incorporate that into future discussions. Okay, so for Ilya and for myself, we're signing off. All right. Thank you. Okay. Let's see here. Where's the recording?